In the Wolflands, destiny doesn't knock, it strikes. And for Lyra, a warrior born of the wild, one split-second choice would bind her to a power she never wanted, and a king she never knew. Welcome, brave souls. Tonight begins a tale of danger, fate, and the moment everything changed. Lyra was tracking a rogue pack when the forest erupted, not with howls, but with the lethal whistle of arrows cutting through the dark. She moved on instinct, slashing and dodging as danger closed in. Then she saw them, golden armor glinting through the chaos, the crest of the Alpha King's personal guard. And beside them, Valerius, the Alpha King himself, a figure carved from power and quiet command, trapped in an ambush meant to erase him. Lyra didn't know him. She didn't owe him loyalty. But she understood danger, and she understood the instinct to protect a life when fate demanded it. A hidden assailant stepped from the shadows, bow drawn, the arrow released, fast, deadly, true. Lyra moved before thought existed. Not her blade, her body. Her shoulder took the strike meant for the king. Pain burst white behind her eyes, the world tilted, muffled voices fading as darkness swallowed her. Her last thought, I changed everything. Lyra awoke not in furs, but soft linens warmed by a glowing hearth, the scent of healing herbs wrapped around her. She winced at the dull ache radiating from her wounded shoulder, but the pain wasn't what made her freeze. It was the faint glowing sigil on her neck, a symbol pulsing like moonlight trapped beneath her skin. Not a wound, not an injury, a binding. Ancient magic awakened by her sacrifice. The door opened. Valerius stepped in, his presence filling the room with effortless authority. His storm-gray eyes swept over her, not possessive, but sharp with gratitude and something unguarded. He spoke quietly, yet the room stilled. You saved my life. That act forged a bond, a rare one. The magic answered your choice. You are tied to the crown now, not by force, but by fate. Lyra's pulse pounded. A bond to a king she'd never met? A destiny she never chose? Valerius continued, a shadow flickering behind his calm words. Until the bond stabilizes, my enemies will come for you. The court will place you under my protection. You will not be imprisoned, but you will not walk freely either. A gilded cage was still a cage. Lyra swallowed hard, whispering the truth rising inside her. I chose to save a life, not to belong to a throne. Something flickered in Valerius's expression, something almost human. You may yet change the fate of us both. What will test Lyra more, the political storm around her new bond, or the war inside her heart fighting a destiny she never wanted? Comment your thoughts below, and if you aren't yet part of the pack, subscribe. Lyra's journey has only begun, and the Wolflands never stay quiet for long.
Freedom was a taste Lyra had known intimately, as wild and untamed as the winds of the Wolflands. Now, confined to chambers fit for royalty, her spirit chafed against the gilded bars of her new reality. But a warrior's instincts do not dull with comfort. They sharpen, seeking vulnerabilities, measuring threats, even in the quietest of rooms. Lyra rises, her movements deliberate, silent. She approaches the window, her rough spun tunic a stark contrast to the silken hangings. She traces the condensation left by her breath on the cool glass, her gaze fixed on the courtyards below. Guards patrol with a languid rhythm, their armor gleaming. They are alert, yes, but not in the constant, hyper-vigilant way she was accustomed to. They are complacent, a weakness. She moves to the heavy oak door, pressing her ear against the wood. The muffled sounds of the palace are a symphony of unfamiliar rhythms. Distant footsteps, hushed voices, the clatter of unseen kitchens. She tests the door's lock with a tentative push, then a firmer one. Solid, impenetrable from this side at least. The door swings open unexpectedly, revealing Valerius. He stands there, a polite, almost deferential smile on his lips, holding a tray laden with fruits and delicate pastries. I hope you are more comfortable, Lyra. Your recovery is paramount. We have the finest healers tending to your wound, and I trust the chamber is to your liking?" Lyra doesn't reply immediately. Her eyes narrow, taking in his seemingly guileless demeanor. The casual offer of sustenance, it felt like a bribe, a way to lull her into a false sense of security. "It is a room," she finally says, her voice low and devoid of emotion. She steps back, putting more distance between them. "And the healers are skilled, I'll grant you that. But this is not comfort, King Valerius. This is a cage." Valerius's smile doesn't falter, but a flicker of something, impatience, crosses his features before he schools it. "A cage of gratitude, perhaps. You saved my life. The Wolflands owe you a debt." "The Wolflands owe me nothing," Lyra retorts, her eyes unwavering, "and I owe them my freedom." Just then, a portly man with shrewd, calculating eyes enters the chamber. He is dressed in rich, dark fabrics, his silver-streaked hair meticulously styled. He bows to Valerius, but his gaze immediately fixes on Lyra, a mixture of suspicion and disdain evident. "Your Majesty," the man begins, his voice dry and raspy, "I trust our guest is settling in, though I must confess my concern remains for the stability of the realm. An unprecedented breach of security, and now this." He gestures vaguely at Lyra, his eyes lingering on her unbound hair and the no-nonsense set of her jaw. Valerius turns to him, a hint of sternness entering his tone. "Lord Vorlog, this is Lyra. She is our guest and under my protection." He then addresses Lyra. "Lord Vorlog is my most trusted advisor. He worries for the kingdom, as is his duty." Vorlog offers a curt nod, his eyes never leaving Lyra. "Indeed, Your Majesty. The attack on your person was elaborate, far more so than a simple bandit ambush. The poison used, the precision of the archers, it suggests a deeper conspiracy at play." Lyra's ears prick up at the mention of conspiracy. Her frustration warred with a sudden surge of analytical curiosity. She forced herself to remain outwardly impassive, but her mind was already racing. An ambush? Or something more planned? Who benefits from Valerius's death? Valerius's expression darkens. "The details are troubling, Vorlog. We are investigating. For now, Lyra is under my direct charge." He turns back to Lyra, his eyes holding hers. "You are safe here, Lyra, but understand your presence has drawn attention. For your own good, and for the good of the kingdom, we must ensure you are not a liability." Later that evening, Lyra presses her ear to the door once more. The voices are hushed, urgent. She can make out Valerius and Vorlog speaking in hushed tones just outside her chamber. Valerius, low, tense. "More than just a rogue pack, you say? The insignia? And the poison? It matches the samples found at the northern border skirmish?" Vorlog, raspy, grim. "Precisely, Your Majesty. This wasn't a random act. Someone wanted you dead, and they used an opportunity, or perhaps created one, to strike. And now, the king's ransom. She is a loose end we cannot afford to ignore." Lyra's breath hitches. Loose end. The words echo in the opulent silence of the chamber. Her gaze drifts to the window, then to the door. Escape was no longer just about reclaiming her freedom. It was about survival.
Confinement can be a prison of the mind, or a crucible for the spirit. For Lyra, the silence of the Alpha King's chambers was a canvas upon which the whispers of treason began to take shape. The instinct that saved a king now drove her to uncover the rot festering beneath the gilded surface. Lyra had spent hours meticulously examining the small chamber when Valerius and Vorlag had been briefly absent. While the polished silks and ornate carvings told tales of wealth, it was the absence of something, and then the presence of the unexpected, that had truly caught her attention. While tending to the lingering soreness of her wound, her fingers had brushed against something rough, lodged near the edge of the ornate bed frame, a sliver of wood, unlike the fine, polished wood of the furniture. Closer inspection, aided by the faint moonlight filtering through the window, revealed it to be the fletching of an arrow, splintered and bearing a faint, dark residue. But it wasn't the residue that was most intriguing. It was the arrowhead it was attached to, a peculiar, almost stylized barb Lyra had never seen before, and a tiny, almost imperceptible scratch on its surface. It didn't match the crude, functional arrows of common hunters, nor the ornate but standard designs of the King's Guard. A simple bandit ambush doesn't splinter its shafts with such
Artistry, she murmurs to herself, her voice barely a whisper. The residue was dry, likely poisoned. The arrowhead was distinctive. The hurried, hushed conversation she'd overheard between Valerius and Vorlag about a northern border skirmish and conspiracy solidified her suspicions. This was no random act. Driven by a need to understand, Lyra makes a bold decision. She needs information that the king's own guards wouldn't provide, and certainly not in a way that would implicate her own investigative efforts. She recalled seeing a fleeting figure in the palace corridors earlier, a woman, moving with quiet purpose, her hands full of scrolls. She remembers overhearing a servant mention the royal archivist, Ilara. A mortal, they'd said, but sharp as any wolf. Later, under the guise of needing to retrieve a personal item she'd purportedly dropped near the archives during her initial disorientation, a story she'd practiced in her head, Lyra ventures out of her chambers. The halls are less heavily patrolled at this hour, the guards perhaps lulled by the perceived safety of their prisoner. She finds the archives, a vast, hushed space filled with the scent of old parchment and beeswax. Ilara, a woman with intelligent, observant eyes and fingers stained with ink, is meticulously organizing scrolls. She looks up as Lyra enters, her expression neutral, but her gaze sharp. "I believe you are Lyra," she states, her voice calm and clear. "The king's guest." "I am," Lyra replies, trying to keep her tone respectful and non-threatening. I believe I may have dropped something of personal significance when I was brought here. A small pouch, perhaps. I recall passing this way." She offers a small, hesitant smile. Ilara's eyes flick over Lyra, taking in her wary posture, the subtle tension in her shoulders. She nods slowly. "The king mentioned you might be disoriented. I will help you look." As Ilara begins to sift through a pile of scrolls, Lyra subtly steers the conversation, her warrior's instinct for interrogation honed through years of extracting information. "The king is fortunate you found him," she says, her gaze flicking towards the door. "It must have been quite the ordeal, those assassins." Ilara pauses, her expression unreadable. "The official report speaks of a bandit ambush gone awry, Your Majesty. But the archives hold discrepancies. Details that do not align." She pulls out a scroll, unrolling it with practiced ease. "The weaponry described, the poison. It is not the typical fare of brigands." Lyra's heart beats a little faster. She discreetly pulls the splintered fletching and the particular arrowhead from a hidden pouch within her tunic. "And does this," she asks, her voice barely audible, "seem familiar?" Ilara's eyes widen almost imperceptibly as she takes in the object. She leans closer, her sharp intellect immediately engaged. She doesn't touch it, but her gaze traces the unusual shape of the arrowhead, then the tiny, almost imperceptible scratch. She closes her eyes for a moment, a mental catalogue being sifted. This is not a sigil I readily recognize from the king's armories," she whispers, her voice tinged with a new urgency. "But the style of the scratch, it reminds me of something I saw on a very old, very restricted ledger. A ledger detailing certain clandestine alliances from years past, whispers of treason that were supposedly silenced." She looks up at Lyra, her eyes now filled with a dawning realization and a shared sense of peril. There was a symbol associated with those whispers, a stylized raven, often depicted with a broken quill, indicating a vow broken or a message unwritten. Lyra's breath catches. She remembers the hushed tones she'd overheard, the words "northern border skirmish." She had dismissed them as political maneuvering. But now, the sigil. She glances at the faint scratch on the arrowhead, a fleeting mark, easily overlooked, but undeniably deliberate. It was a signature. Lyra is back in her chamber, the moonlight painting the room in shades of silver and shadow. She holds the arrowhead, her fingers tracing the minute scratch. The broken quill description echoes in her mind. Then her eyes fall on a small, intricately carved raven that adorns the headboard of the king's bed, a detail she had previously dismissed as mere decoration. The raven's quill appears distinctly broken. The whispers had found a form, a symbol, a broken quill etched into the very fabric of the king's chambers, mirroring the mark of treachery hidden on a deadly arrow. Lyra had found a clue, but in the heart of the Wolflands, clues often led to more dangerous truths.
The bite mark was more than a claim. It was a conduit, a tether forged in blood and desperation, beginning to echo with the pulse of the Alpha King's very essence. And as this unseen bond tightened, Lyra found herself thrust into a world of glittering deception, where the deadliest predators wore smiles, not fangs. Lyra stumbles back from the window, a wave of inexplicable emotion washing over her, a flicker of annoyance, a surge of ambition, a phantom scent of the hunt. It's Valerius. She can feel him, even though he is miles away, across the sprawling palace. It's disorienting, violating. Her warrior's mind, trained to dissect threats, is now struggling to understand this involuntary connection, this forced empathy. It feels like a betrayal of her own senses, a weakness she cannot afford. The summons arrives an hour later, delivered by a stern-faced guard. A royal banquet. Lyra's stomach tightens. She had hoped to avoid prolonged contact, to gather her intel discreetly. Now she must face the entire court. Into a grand hall, torches blaze, casting a warm, flickering light on walls adorned with wolf pelts and ornate tapestries depicting legendary hunts. Laughter and the murmur of conversation fill the air, but Lyra feels a palpable chill. As she enters, a hush falls over a section of the room. All eyes turn to her. A rough-hewn woman, in borrowed but still ill-fitting fine clothing, standing beside the Alpha King. The stares are not curious. They are sharp, appraising, and deeply suspicious. In the eyes of the werewolf nobility, Lyra was an anomaly, a mortal, a warrior, and now the king's ransom. To them, she was an insult to their ancient bloodlines, a dangerous wild card in their intricate game of power. Lyra keeps her chin high, her gaze sweeping across the room, cataloging faces, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the veiled glances. She can feel Valerius beside her, a steadying presence, but also a source of the unsettling sensory echoes. He offers her a faint, almost imperceptible nod, his eyes holding a flicker of something she can't quite decipher. Curiosity, perhaps? Or an assessment of her performance? A woman with eyes like chips of ice and hair the color of spun moonlight approaches. She moves with an effortless predatory grace, her crimson gown a stark contrast to Lyra's muted attire. This, Lyra senses, is Lady Seraphina, a name she'd heard whispered in the servants' quarters, a powerful matriarch, fiercely protective of her lineage. "Your Majesty," she purrs, her voice dripping with honeyed malice as she addresses Valerius, but her eyes remain fixed on Lyra. "It is refreshing to see such unconventional company gracing your table. One wonders what lessons a mere mortal warrior could possibly teach us of true strength." She turns her gaze fully on Lyra. "Or perhaps," she continues, her smile widening, revealing unnaturally sharp canine teeth, "she is here to learn what it truly means to be vulnerable, a lesson many of your kind find difficult to grasp." Lyra feels a jolt, a phantom wave of Seraphina's contempt, tinged with a cold, predatory hunger. It's sickening, but she refuses to betray her unease. She meets Seraphina's icy stare, her own gaze hardening. "My strength lies in survival, Lady Seraphina," she replies, her voice steady, though a tremor runs through her that isn't entirely her own. She subtly shifts her weight, her body language radiating a quiet confidence, a warrior's poise. Seraphina's smile tightens, her eyes narrowing. She leans in, her voice dropping to a near whisper, audible only to Lyra and Valerius. "Survival is a fleeting comfort, little wolf, especially for those who lack true lineage, those who are merely expendable." Lyra's jaw clenches, but she forces herself to remain outwardly composed. As Seraphina glides away, Lyra feels another wave of Valerius's presence, this one laced with a surprising undercurrent of protectiveness, a feeling that is both alien and deeply unsettling. She glances at him, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes meet across the crowded hall. In his gaze, she sees not just intrigue, but a possessive flicker that sends a shiver down her spine, a premonition of the tangled web she is now caught in. In the gilded cage, Lyra had found her first true adversary, and as the echoes of Valerius's emotions began to bleed into her own consciousness, she understood that the greatest threat might not be the enemies without, but the ties that now bound her to the heart of the wolf den.
The whispers of treason had led Lyra to the very heart of the Wolfland's lore, but the answers she sought were not merely about a conspiracy, they were about destiny itself. For the mark on her skin was not just a claim, but a signpost, pointing towards a future etched in prophecy. Valerius's grave expression is etched with a mixture of awe and trepidation as he points to a section of the ancient text. "Here, he murmurs, his voice resonating with the weight of history. The Codex of the First Moons. It speaks of a time when the Alpha King's life is threatened and a debt is paid not with gold, but with a life force, a king's ransom. Lyra leans closer, her eyes scanning the faded script. A life force? What does that mean? Ilara, sensing their struggle, approaches. The lore is metaphorical. It speaks of a mortal, a chosen or perhaps unwilling sacrifice, whose fate becomes inextricably tied to the Alpha. If the king's life is saved by this ransom, the prophecy states it can herald an era of unprecedented prosperity, a time of great unity under a strengthened Alpha. Or, she pauses, her gaze meeting Lyra's, or it could signify utter ruin, a descent into chaos and division if the bond is not honored or if the ransom is seen as a weakness. Lyra feels a chill that has nothing to do with the archive's temperature. Her presence here, her survival, is not an accident. It's a fulcrum upon which the fate of the entire Wolflands might pivot. The gnawing unease from the involuntary emotional surges with Valerius now takes on a more terrifying significance. So my survival isn't just about saving your life, Valerius. It's about fulfilling a prophecy. And the stakes are the kingdom itself. Valerius nods, his jaw tight. It would seem so. And if this prophecy speaks of unity or ruin, then there are those who would seek to ensure it is ruin. He gestures to another passage. This speaks of the mark of the Alpha, a symbol of his right to rule, but also a conduit for his pack's strength. When borne by one outside the bloodline, it can signify a pact of power, or a point of vulnerability. Lyra instinctively touches the bite mark on her neck. The faint throbbing sensation, the echo of Valerius' emotions, feels more pronounced now, as if the prophecy itself is awakening something within her. Suddenly, a stern, booming voice cuts through the hushed reverence of the archives. Valerius, still poring over dusty scrolls while the wolves howl at your borders? Some concerns require more than ancient ink. A formidable figure enters the archives. He is powerfully built, his dark armor etched with the rugged beauty of mountain stone. His eyes are sharp like a hawk's, and his jaw is set with an unyielding resolve. This is Thane Kalin of the Obsidian Peaks, a leader known for his fierce independence and long-standing rivalry with Valerius. He bows curtly, but his gaze sweeps over Lyra with undisguised suspicion. The Obsidian Peaks remain loyal, Valerius, but whispers of unrest reach even my mountain fastness. Whispers of the Alpha King's near death and the unusual circumstances of his salvation. Some see it as a sign of weakness, a departure from tradition. Valerius rises, his own authority evident. Thane Kalin, my apologies for my focus. The matters of the court are complex. As for my survival, it is a testament to the loyalty of those who serve me. His gaze pointedly lands on Lyra. Kalin's eyes narrow, his gaze lingering on Lyra, then flicking to the ancient tome. Loyalty born of what, Valerius? Prophecy or desperation? Some believe this king's ransom you've acquired will fracture the very unity you claim to cherish, that the mark you've bestowed will be the undoing of the pack, not its salvation. Lyra feels a surge of anger at his dismissive tone, but Valerius places a subtle hand on her arm, a silent plea for restraint. Valerius's expression darkens. The prophecy is a guide, Thane, not a sentence, and Lyra is under my protection. Her presence serves the kingdom. He turns back to the Codex, his finger landing on a final, chilling passage. It speaks of the mark of the Alpha, and its connection to unity or division. It states that when born by one of mortal flesh, it is a potent catalyst, capable of forging an unbreakable bond that strengthens the pack or tears it asunder. Lyra stares at the passage, her hand instinctively going to the bite mark. The ancient words, the prophecy, the political machinations, the spectral connection to Valerius, it all coalesced into a terrifying realization. Her very existence was now a battleground for the future of the Wolflands. The prophecies had spoken. Lyra was not just a prisoner, but a pawn in a game of kingdoms, her fate entwined with the Alpha Kings and the very soul of the Wolflands. But who sought ruin, and who truly desired unity? The shadows were deepening, and the broken quill sigil was a stark reminder that no one was truly safe.
In the Wolflands, alliances were as fragile as ice on a thawing river. Lyra had learned of prophecies and conspiracies, but now a more immediate danger loomed. A predator in wolf's clothing, whose motives were as sharp and deadly as any blade. A formal announcement echoes through the palace corridors. The arrival of Thorn, Lord of the Crimson Maw Pack, a formidable rival whose territory bordered Valerius's and whose animosity was legendary.
He arrives not with an army, but with an entourage of imposing warriors, his presence radiating an arrogant confidence that instantly puts Lyra's teeth on edge. He's different from Kaelin's rugged, mountain-bred stoicism. Thorn is sleek, calculating, a predator who masks his intent with charm. Thorn, a man whose presence seems to fill the room, greets Valerius with a smile that doesn't quite reach his cold eyes. His movements are fluid, his voice smooth as polished obsidian. He bows to Valerius, then his gaze sweeps across the assembled courtiers, lingering on Lyra, who stands slightly apart, her warrior's instincts screaming danger. Thorn, his voice carrying easily, "Valerius, my old friend, the journey was invigorating. The winds from the obsidian peaks carry whispers of unrest, and I thought it prudent to offer my support to ensure the Alpha King's reign remains as secure as the mountains themselves." His eyes, however, flick to Lyra again, and there's a glint of something predatory, something that recognizes her warrior's bearing, her untamed spirit. He's seen her potential, not as a prophecy fulfilled, but as a potential weapon or a vulnerability. Lyra feels a prickle of unease, a familiar sensation. Thorn's smile, his condescending offer of support, it's the same practiced deception she'd encountered from the worst street bosses and back-alley manipulators. He's here to probe, to exploit, to sow discord. She tries to catch Valerius's eye, to convey her alarm, but he's engaged in polite but firm diplomacy with Thorn. Later, as Thorn circulates amongst the court, his smooth words weaving a subtle web of dissent, Lyra finds an opportunity. She approaches Valerius, her gaze fixed on Thorn, who is currently charming Lady Seraphina, a glint of amusement in his eyes. He's dangerous. His offer of support is a lie. He's here to gauge your weaknesses, to undermine you. Valerius, however, is caught in the delicate dance of diplomacy. "Lyra, Thorn is a rival, not a fool. He understands the consequences of overt hostility. He is making his presence known. It is to be expected." He offers a reassuring but dismissive smile. "Your instincts are sharp, but the court operates on more than just immediate threats. Trust that I am handling it." Her frustration boils. Handling it? He's already planting seeds of doubt. He's looking at me, Valerius, like I'm some prize he wants to steal. He knows I'm not just some mortal captive. Valerius's jaw tightens, a flicker of the protectiveness she'd felt at the banquet, now laced with annoyance. "Lyra, you are under my protection. Your status is clear. Let the nobles play their games. You are safe." His words, meant to reassure, only deepen her sense of isolation. Safe? She was a pawn, and now a perceived threat to the established order. Her warnings falling on deaf ears. Just as despair begins to set in, a shadow detaches itself from a nearby alcove. It's Rhys, a figure from her past, a smuggler, a fence, a man who operated in the gray spaces of the law, someone she'd crossed paths with during her lone wolf days. He nods, his expression grim. "Lyra, heard you were in the king's clutches. Not your style. There's a way out if you're tired of the gilded cage. A shipment leaves at dawn, bound for the free cities. You'd be long gone before anyone noticed." Lyra's heart leaps at the offer of freedom. The open road, the wild air, it's everything she craves. But then she thinks of the prophecy, the sigil, the threat of Thorn, and the chilling dismissal from Valerius. She can't run now, not when the kingdom's fate, and perhaps her own, hangs in the balance. "Rhys, I can't. Not yet." Rhys's eyebrows shoot up. "You're choosing this viper's nest?" "I have to know what's happening. There are enemies here that you can't outrun, and I think Thorn is one of them. He's not here to support Valerius. He's here to break him." Rhys looks at her, a mixture of disbelief and a grudging respect in his eyes. "You're a fool, Lyra, but a brave one. If you change your mind, the shipment leaves at dawn. Just ask for the shadowed star." He slips away as silently as he appeared, leaving Lyra alone with her reinforced fears and her refusal of freedom. Later that evening, at a strained reception hosted by Thorn, the atmosphere crackles with unspoken tension. Thorn, the picture of cordiality, raises a goblet. "To the Alpha King," Thorn began, his voice resonating with feigned respect. "May his reign be long and unified." His gaze sweeps over the assembled courtiers, then lands directly on Lyra, who stands beside Valerius, trying to project a composure she doesn't feel. "Though true unity," Thorn continues, his smile widening, "often requires strength from all its members, and perhaps," he adds, his voice dropping slightly, a subtle, dangerous inflection entering it, "understanding that some bonds, no matter how strong they appear, are ultimately expendable." His eyes linger on Lyra, a veiled threat that chills her to the bone, and she feels Valerius tense beside her. Lyra had warned Valerius, but her words had been a whisper against the storm of court politics. Now Thorn's challenge hung in the air like a thunderclap, his predatory gaze promising a reckoning. The lion had roared, and the wolf was about to growl, but Lyra found herself caught precariously between them, a pawn in a game she was desperate to understand, but terrified of losing.
Thorn's challenge had been a spark, but it was the undercurrent of deceit within the palace walls that truly ignited Lyra's suspicion. The whispers of treason were no longer just shadows. They were coalescing, forming the shape of a hidden enemy, a viper coiled in the heart of the Alpha King's court. Lyra can't shake the feeling that Thorn's challenge wasn't just about undermining Valerius, but about creating a distraction for something, or someone, closer to home. She remembers Vorlag's immediate focus on the discrepancies and the cryptic mention of unprecedented breaches of security. He had seemed genuinely concerned, but there was a ruthlessness in his pragmatism that had always unsettled her. And Lady Seraphina's venom, while personal, felt almost too performative, as if she were deflecting attention. Driven by this gnawing certainty, Lyra decides to take a calculated risk. She uses her newfound, albeit limited freedom, to observe the inner workings of the palace more closely. She notices Lord Vorlag's comings and goings, the hushed meetings he holds, the coded messages passed between him and certain couriers. It's during one such observation, tucked away in a shadowed alcove near the king's private study, that she witnesses something that confirms her deepest fears. Vorlag emerges from the study, not alone, but in hushed conversation with Thorn. Their body language is conspiratorial, their voices too low to discern the words, but the shared intensity, the furtive glances towards the main hall are unmistakable. Vorlag then slips a small, folded parchment into Thorn's hand before melting back into the palace shadows. Lyra's heart pounds. She knows Thorn is a threat, but Vorlag, Valerius' trusted advisor? Lyra's mind races. She needs proof, irrefutable proof. She knows where Thorn is likely to be, mingling with the court, putting on his show of cordiality. With newfound stealth, honed by years of survival, she maneuvers through the periphery of the reception hall, her eyes scanning for an opportunity. She spots Thorn momentarily distracted, laughing with a group of nobles. Lyra, using the cover of a serving staff's movement, deftly snatches the parchment from his discarded cloak, left carelessly on a nearby chair. She retreats to the relative safety of a less populated corridor, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolds the parchment. It's not a long message, but it's damning. Written in a formal hand Lyra recognizes from her brief visits to the archives, Vorlag's hand. It details troop movements, patrol routes, and specifically mentions a planned disruption during the upcoming royal feast, designed to isolate the Alpha and test the loyalty of his precious king's ransom. Just as Lyra finishes reading, she hears approaching footsteps. She quickly conceals the parchment. To her surprise, it's Captain Rorik, the stern but observant guard captain who had escorted her on occasion. He stops, his gaze sharp, noting her agitated state. "Everything all right, Lyra?" he asks, his voice low and unexpectedly gentle. He's seen her warnings dismissed, her unease treated as paranoia. Lyra hesitates. Trust is a luxury she can't afford, but Rorik's steady gaze seems to hold a genuine concern, a recognition of her earlier warnings. "Captain," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lord Vorlag, he is not what he seems. I have proof of betrayal. He met with Thorn." Rorik's eyes narrow, a flicker of alarm crossing his stern features. He's loyal to Valerius, but he's also pragmatic. He's witnessed Vorlag's influence and Lyra's unusual insight. "Show me," he commands, his voice firm but filled with a swift sense of urgency. Lyra quickly unfolds the parchment. Rorik's eyes widen as he reads, his initial skepticism vanishing, replaced with a grim understanding. "By the moons, he's been playing us all." The scene shifts to Valerius' private study. The atmosphere is charged with a palpable tension. Valerius stands, his face a mask of disbelief and growing fury, as Lyra, with Rorik standing staunchly beside her, presents the parchment. The king's normally controlled demeanor is fractured, his eyes burning with betrayal. "Vorlag, my advisor. He would conspire with Thorn?" Valerius' voice is a low growl, laced with the primal anger of a cornered wolf. Lyra meets his gaze, her own filled with a newfound confidence, a steely resolve. "He met with Thorn. This parchment details a plan to undermine your authority, to isolate you, and to use me as a catalyst. He calls me King's Ransom and a planned disruption. He clearly intends to make my presence here a weakness, not a prophecy of unity." Valerius' gaze snaps to Rorik, who nods grimly. "The evidence is undeniable, Your Majesty, and my own observations of Vorlag's recent activities have been unusual." Valerius slams his fist onto his desk, the sound echoing through the study. "He has served me for 20 years. 20 years! And this is his thanks. Treachery?" He turns back to Lyra, his expression softening slightly, replaced by a dawning respect. You You uncovered this. You risked much to bring this to me. Suddenly, the heavy study door is thrown open. Lord Vorlag stands there, his face a mask of outrage, feigning innocence. Your Majesty, I heard commotion. Is something amiss? Valerius turns, his eyes blazing. Amiss, Vorlag, indeed. A traitor has been unmasked in your midst. And it seems you are the architect of this deceit. Vorlag's facade crumbles, revealing a cold, calculating fury beneath. His eyes flick to Lyra, burning with a venomous hatred. You meddling mortal. You were a pawn, nothing more, he spits, his voice losing its cultivated smoothness, revealing a raw, exposed rage. You think this is about Thorn, about power? You know nothing. My grievance runs deeper than your peasant understanding can fathom, Lyra. This is for what Valerius did to my family generations ago. And Thorn is merely a tool. There are forces at play here you cannot comprehend, Lyra, forces that will consume you all. Vorlag, cornered, lunges not at Valerius, but towards Lyra. A desperate, enraged move. Rorik intercepts him with swift, brutal efficiency, subduing the former advisor. Valerius watches, his face grim. The implications of Vorlag's words, forces at play, consume you all, echoing in the sudden, heavy silence. The traitor was exposed, but the revelation was a double-edged sword. Lyra had earned her place, her loyalty proven not by words, but by daring action. But the serpent in their midst was merely a pawn, and the true architects of their downfall remained hidden, their motives steeped in ancient grudges and unseen powers that now threatened to engulf them all.
With the immediate threat of betrayal exposed, the shadows of the past began to creep forward, casting long, haunting specters over the present. For Valerius, the unmasking of Vorlag had not brought peace, but a chilling reminder of old wounds. And Lyra, the warrior who lived for the moment, found herself drawn into the very history she had always sought to escape. Valerius stares into the flames, his voice low, rough with emotion. Vorlag's grievance. It was not just about power. It was about my family, about Alara. He pauses, the name a raw wound. Alara was my mate, years ago, before my Alpha coronation. She was taken, during a raid on the southern territories, raiders who claimed allegiance to no one, yet their tactics, their ferocity, it was organized. Vorlag's family was involved. They were meant to guard the region, but they allowed it to happen, or worse. He looks at Lyra, his eyes holding a deep, uncharacteristic vulnerability. I was too young, too consumed with proving myself. I couldn't protect her. The failure, it still haunts me. Vorlag used that grief, that guilt to manipulate me, to foster resentment, all while secretly plotting his own rise. He played on my perceived weakness, on the very thing that shattered me. Lyra listens intently, her usual warrior stoicism softening with empathy. She's seen the pain of loss in the fringes of her own life, the hollow ache of those left behind. Loss can twist a person, she says softly, her gaze steady. It can make them seek vengeance, or try to bury the pain so deep they forget who they are. Valerius nods, a heavy sigh escapes him. And you, Lyra? You live on the fringes, your past a closely guarded secret. What ghosts do you carry? Lyra turns from the fire, her gaze drifting to the window, the faint moonlight a stark reminder of her wilder existence. I was part of a pack, once, not like yours, but a found family. We looked out for each other, until one of them, he made a choice that cost others dearly. I couldn't forgive him. Couldn't face the aftermath, so I left. I chose solitude, believing it's safer than facing the consequences of attachment, safer than facing myself. Her voice is barely a whisper, the regret palpable. A soft, almost imperceptible glow emanates from Lyra's bite mark for a fleeting moment. Valerius feels a surge of understanding, a warmth that seeps into him, easing the icy grip of his own past trauma. It's a shared echo, a sense of being truly seen, truly understood, for the first time. Valerius reaches out, his hand hovering near hers before gently resting on her arm. It's not a possessive gesture, but one of genuine comfort and connection. We both carry scars, Lyra, scars that run deeper than skin. But perhaps they also show us where true strength lies, not in isolation, but in connection, in facing the past, together. Lyra looks at his hand, then up at his face, seeing past the Alpha King to the man beneath, the man who has also suffered. A genuine smile, small and hesitant, touches her lips. Perhaps. The unspoken question of their bond hangs in the air, no longer just a claim, but a possibility, a shared path. Later, as Valerius pores over more ancient texts, seeking any further details on Alara's attackers, Lyra watches him. Her gaze falls on a faded, intricate drawing in a different section of the codex. It depicts not only the broken quill, but also, alongside it, an ancient, almost forgotten symbol. A stylized representation of a roaring lion, chained and seemingly defeated. Her breath catches. The broken quill, the ravens. I thought it was a symbol of broken oaths, of a conspiracy. But that lion, it's not just a depiction of power. It's a specific family crest, a crest I've seen before. Vorlag's family. They were rivals to the Alpha lineage for generations. They never forgot their defeat. The loss of Alara wasn't just a random act of violence. It was an attack fueled by a deep, ancient hatred. Vorlag wasn't just seeking personal revenge. He was seeking to reclaim a perceived birthright, using Alara's death as a catalyst. And Thorn is simply a weapon in their long-planned war. Valerius looks up, sensing Lyra's sudden intensity. She points to the drawing, her finger tracing the chained lion. A profound understanding dawns on his face, a chilling confirmation of her discovery. The ghosts of Valerius's past had not only returned, but had orchestrated the present. The conspiracy was no longer just about political power. It was a vendetta centuries in the making, with Lyra's fate and the fate of the Wolflands inextricably bound to a primal roar of vengeance. The architect of deceit was about to reveal his true colors, and the true price of loyalty was about to be paid. The ghosts of the past had not merely haunted, they had risen to claim their due. Vorlag's vengeance, fueled by ancient hatred and wielded by Thorn, erupted into a storm that threatened to consume the Wolflands. But Lyra, the king's ransom, was no longer a pawn to be played. She was the warrior who would forge her own destiny in the crucible of battle. The attack is swift and brutal. Thorn, fueled by Vorlag's machinations and his own ambition, leads a force not of simple bandits, but of elite warriors, bearing the sigil of the broken quill alongside the stylized roaring lion. They have breached the outer defenses, their target clear, Valerius and the prophecy he embodies. Lyra, her senses heightened by the bond with Valerius and the adrenaline of battle, directs the palace guard with a tactical prowess that surprises even Valerius. She anticipates Thorn's flanking maneuvers, identifies weaknesses in their assault, and leads countercharges with a ferocity that belies her mortal origins. She is no longer just a prisoner, she is a commander, her decisions saving lives and holding the line. Scene shifts to a key strategic point, perhaps a vital bridge leading to the inner sanctum or the throne room itself. Thorn, a whirlwind of controlled aggression, cuts through guards, his eyes locked on Valerius. Vorlag stands at his side, a chillingly calm presence, a conductor of chaos. "This is for generations of shame, Valerius," Vorlag roars, his voice distorted by rage. "Your ancestor stole our birthright. Now the lion shall roar again." Valerius meets his charge head-on, his sword a blur of silver. "Your birthright was built on betrayal and murder." Amid the chaos, Lyra sees Thorn diverting his attention not towards Valerius, but towards a critical escape route. He's not just trying to kill Valerius, he's trying to shatter the symbol of the kingdom itself. Lyra breaks from the main fray, her movements economical and deadly, intercepting Thorn's elite warriors. She fights with a primal grace, each parry and thrust a testament to her life on the fringes, now amplified by the conviction of her purpose. Her bite mark on her neck pulses not with pain, but with a fierce, resonant power that fuels her. In a critical moment, as Thorn lunges for Valerius, who is momentarily disarmed by Vorlag, Lyra anticipates the move. She uses Thorn's own momentum against him, a swift, decisive maneuver learned in countless life-or-death struggles. Thorn stumbles, momentarily off balance. Valerius seizes the opportunity, his eyes locking with Lyra's for a fleeting, understanding moment. He disarms Vorlag, and then, with a roar that echoes the ancient strength of his lineage, disarms Thorn. The climax. Vorlag, his face contorted with a final desperate fury, pulls a hidden vial. "You will not have victory!" he screams, hurling it towards the throne, a vial of a potent, volatile substance designed to cause chaos and destruction, a final act of spite. Lyra sees the vial. The prophecy spoke of ruin. This is it. Without hesitation, she throws herself forward, tackling Vorlag just as he makes his desperate move. The vial shatters against the stone floor, not causing widespread destruction, but releasing a thick, choking smoke that causes immediate disorientation and choking. In the ensuing confusion, as Vorlag is subdued by Lyra and Rorik, Valerius confronts Thorn. Thorn, disarmed and defeated, stares at Lyra with a mixture of shock and grudging respect. He sees not a mortal pawn, but a warrior who defied fate.
You rewrote the prophecy, he rasps, his voice hoarse. But this isn't over. Even in defeat, the forces that truly pull the strings, they are patient. You have merely delayed the inevitable. The immediate threat is neutralized. Vorlog is captured, Thorn is defeated. The sounds of battle begin to recede, replaced by the groans of the wounded and the hushed whispers of relief. Valerius turns to Lyra, his gaze no longer that of a king to a prisoner, but of one warrior to another, of one soul to another. He sees her exhaustion, her resolve, and the undeniable strength she displayed. He removes his crown, a symbolic gesture. Valerius approaches Lyra. You stood against them, Lyra. You fought not as a pawn, but as a defender. The prophecy, it spoke of unity or ruin. You have ensured unity. You have rewritten our fate. He offers his hand, not to claim her, but to acknowledge her. The king's ransom is no longer a debt. It is a title you have earned. Lyra looks at his outstretched hand, then at her own bloodied but unbowed form. She has faced her past, confronted her fears, and fought for a future she believes in. The unity that Valerius has striven for, the strength she sees in him when he's not burdened by his past. The bite mark on her neck pulses not with pain, but with a fierce, resonant power that fuels her. Lyra takes Valerius's hand. Her choice is made. She doesn't claim a throne, but she doesn't retreat to the fringes either. Her standing is irrevocably changed. Her gaze meets Valerius's, a silent understanding passing between them. The fight for the kingdom is far from over, but for now, they stand together. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Thorn's final words, a chilling echo of Vorlog's prophecy, hinted at a darkness that still lurked. Lyra, the warrior who refused to be a sacrifice, had carved her own destiny. But as the dust settled, a new question arose. What was the true price of this hard-won peace, and who would emerge from the shadows when the next reckoning came?
The storm had passed, leaving behind the quiet aftermath of a kingdom tested. The prophecy of ruin had been defied, not by ancient magic, but by the courage of a warrior and the strength of an Alpha's heart. Lyra, the king's ransom, was no longer defined by a debt, but by her indomitable spirit. Valerius's voice rings through the hall, clear and strong. You have all witnessed the depths of betrayal that sought to tear our kingdom asunder. You have seen the courage of those who stood against it. Today we honor those who defended us, and we acknowledge a truth that has been forged in fire. He turns to Lyra, his gaze steady and filled with a profound respect. Lyra, he begins, his voice resonating with sincerity. You arrived among us as a captive, a king's ransom, bound by fate and prophecy, but you have proven yourself to be far more. You are a warrior, a strategist, a defender of our people. Your instincts saved lives, your courage turned the tide, and your unwavering spirit rewrote a destiny meant for ruin. The mark on your neck was a claim of debt. Today, it becomes a symbol of earned honor and a testament to the strength that can arise from the most unexpected bonds. A ripple of murmurs goes through the court. Lady Seraphina watches with a tight, unreadable expression, while Captain Rorik stands with his arms crossed, a subtle nod of approval on his face. Therefore, he continues, his voice growing firmer, I do not offer you a title of subservience. I offer you a partnership. Lyra, I name you protector of the Wolflands, an equal voice in council, and a defender of our borders. You will stand by my side, not as a hostage, but as an ally. Your strength has earned you this place. Lyra steps forward, her warrior's posture exuding confidence. She meets Valerius's gaze, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. Your Majesty, she begins, her voice clear and steady, carrying across the hushed hall. I have never sought titles or thrones. I am a warrior. My strength lies in action, not in pronouncements. I accept your offer, Valerius, not as a king's ransom, but as a shield for this kingdom, and as an ally to its Alpha. She pauses, her gaze sweeping across the court, meeting the eyes of nobles and guards alike. My loyalty is earned, and my path is my own. I will stand with you, but I will not be defined by a cage. A sense of awe and acceptance washes over the court. Lyra's defiance, her insistence on her own terms, earns her a new level of respect. Valerius's own gaze holds a deep affection, a testament to their journey from captivity to this partnership. Later, in the quiet of Valerius's chambers, the fire crackling softly, Lyra and Valerius share a rare moment of peace. Lyra gently touches the bite mark on her neck. It no longer feels like a brand of ownership, but a connection,
a shared history that has bound them. "You chose to stay," Valerius says, his voice a low rumble, filled with a warmth that is now unmistakable. "Knowing the dangers, knowing the wolves within the court." Lyra looks at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I chose to fight for what is right, Valerius, and you, Valerius, are worth fighting for. Not as my king, but as my partner, my friend." She hesitates, then adds, her voice softer. "Perhaps more." Valerius's hand finds hers, their fingers intertwining. The shared vulnerability, the empathy forged in their confessions, has blossomed into something deeper, something real. "And you, Lyra," he replies, his thumb gently caressing her hand, "have shown me that strength is not just in lineage, but in spirit. That a true partnership can forge a destiny stronger than any prophecy. The threats may still linger, the horizon may hold new storms, but with you by my side, I face them not as a solitary alpha, but as a united force." They share a look, a silent acknowledgement of their bond, a promise of future challenges met together. The bite mark on Lyra's neck, once a symbol of her captivity, now gleams faintly in the firelight, a mark of unity, of a partnership forged in the heart of the Wolflands. The camera pans out, showing them standing together, a strong and harmonious unit, ready to face whatever the future holds. The king's ransom had found her true calling. No longer a captive, but a partner. The alpha and the warrior, united by fate, bound by respect, and ready to lead the Wolflands into a new era. The shadows of the past had receded, but the horizon promised new storms, new alliances, and a future shaped by their courage and their unbreakable bond.